Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Son of Sam Chronicles. I'm RockerMike. We got Rob Rossi, top left, and bottom left, Carl Denaro. And welcome back to Chris. This is his second show with us. Thank you, Chris, for coming back. Oh, you're going to switch it on me now, Rob? Okay, Chris is on. All right.
Boys.
That's all right. So Chris is back. Today we're going to talk about the Voskerichian shooting that happened on March 8th, 1977 in Forrest Hills. It's been talked about many times, but I think we're going to take a deeper dive today into it, mainly because if you look at all the shootings, it really is different out of all of them in many ways, and even towards the idea of multiple people involved in the shootings. Okay, which Chris is going to get into. Chris, you gave me a really nice timeline with everything. For some reason, I couldn't print it up, so I'm going to be working off my phone talking about it with you. Why don't you start with what happened on March 8th, 1977?
Okay, so again, thanks, guys, for having me on. I had a blast last time. I'm sure today's going to be awesome. It's been great getting to know you guys as well through the process. On March 8th, 1977, I think it was about just over a month after Christine Fruend was shot and killed in Forrest Hills. We have another shooting, basically less than a block away, it appears.
A few hundred feet.
Right.
Yeah.
And the murder in that case was of a young Columbia University student, Virginia Voskerichian. She was a stylish girl. I would say fairly good looking for her time. Immigrated with her family here from Bulgaria or somewhere in Eastern Europe, but it appears it's an Armenian last name. The interesting thing about this case, after really taking a deep dive into it, for me, is it's a clear indication that the politics got ahead of the investigation. There may have been some fumbles by the PD on this one as well. And honestly, it really proves or gives you a lot of proof that multiple people were involved in these shootings. We could question, and we will question, whether or not this was a spontaneous murder, or if it happened for some reasons on this show. But there's just it's way more complex, I think, of an event within the whole Son of Sam story than is actually led on to be by the community, 40 years later or something, whatever it is later.
Yeah, I think that. Sorry, Rob.
I still think out of all the murder, this is the only one that looked like a straight up hit, like a mob hit. Like they knew what time this girl was coming, and they set it up to get her, but they knew what time she was coming. She was targeted. They knew who they wanted.
Rob, we discussed this on the last video. I think a lot of these are like hits, but this one is really is exactly what
they knew who they wanted. They aimed for this person. They knew when she was coming. They waited for her, and she was sabotaged. Like, to me, this is like probably a hit. Let's get these guys to do it.
Yeah. Now, most people, I think, at least on some level, look at the last shooting, the Moskowitz one, as one that kind of is something that Berkowitz could never have done or anything like that. But this one, I think, because you have the witnesses, the joggers, witnessing a guy, big guy with straight back hair, slick back hair, right? I think he said brush back hair. Okay. They witness him in two spots, very in close proximity to where the shooting happened, and where they were jogging. They saw him. He looked creepy. They continued jogging down by Tennis Place. They see him again, which was kind of odd because he couldn't have been there so quick, but that's what they noticed.
Right. The way it was explained is there. She does a loop from her house from Exeter. She comes down Fleet all the way down to Continental, and then bangs that left. I think it's a left, and at the corner there, right across the street from where Virginia was shot, actually, she sees a weirdo with brushback hair, a 3/4 length raincoat, I guess you would call it, or army jacket. I think it was a raincoat, but it was beige.
Raincoat.
Was it raining that night?
I don't know. It was supposed to be the first warmer night of the year, which is why she apparently walked from the subway station to her house. But it just doesn't feel like there were a ton of people out that night. You do have the jogger with her brother, and the jogger, I guess, caught. She saw the man sitting there, or standing there rather, and she got freaked out by him. And she decided to go to the other side of the street a little bit with her brother, and then cut that left onto Tennis, back to Exeter, right to her house. Probably the shortest jog I've ever seen. Usually people go a little bit longer. What she says is when she gets past that initial corner on Continental, she looks behind herself and she doesn't see him really trailing her that much. And then after she bangs the left and gets on Exeter, she doesn't see him there either. But later on, when she gets to her door, the guy's at the corner, and she kind of couldn't figure that out. And I've played with it multiple times, and there might be a way that person could have gotten to that corner by foot very quickly, just as she's getting to the door. But something tells me he either had a bike or someone maybe rolled up with a car there or whatever.
I doubt it was a bike. I would say it's got to be a car.
Perfect.
But then you have, of course, ski cap.
So the time there is pretty important. Mm-hmm. She's time stamps that at around 7:15.
The jogger you're talking about.
The jogger, yeah. Barlow, the other witness in this, basically says in 77 and then again in 79 that he was getting home from Atlantic City on a business convention or business trip.
Right.
He was an engineer at around 7:30. So he parks the car at 7:30 and he hears what he calls a firecracker or a group of firecrackers of some kind. And I guess he doesn't go to the scene, but someone starts running towards him, and what he describes in 77 is a 16 to 18-year-old, stocky, wearing a dark sweater and a stocking hat with white stripe. This is in the police report.
Yeah. 77.
Exactly. He says he did not see where the suspect ran after. That's extremely important because when we get to 79, he says something totally different.
And that's something I want to stop you for 1 second, Chris. Call. Would you agree, possibly, because I kind of feel this way, would you agree that the 79 version of his story is just like ridiculous and practically we shouldn't even listen to it? Because he seems like if you look at what he's saying, he's like, I'm positive it was Berkowitz. He describes an outfit that Berkowitz was wearing, I think, the day he got arrested, the white shirt and everything. Yeah. Okay. I feel that no offense to Mr. Barlow, but he had 2 years of media saturation with this. Okay. And I think he convinced himself that he saw Berkowitz, but the 77 police report's quite different because he describes somebody there as, young, teenage, could be male or female, wearing a ski cap. What do you think, Cole? You think you can listen to that second statement or not?
Well, the one thing we can all agree on is that either the 77 statement or the 79 statement, both of them cannot be true. One of them is not true. I tend to believe, just using common sense, that the statement made the day after, 2 days after the shooting, is going to be a lot more accurate than the one made 2 years later. This is a second situation that we've been in conversation with the Son of Sam research community, about statements made the day after and 2 years later. And like I said, I don't know any more than anyone else, but if you get conflicting statements 2 years apart, to me, common sense should tell you that the statement made closer to the shooting would be more accurate.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Carl.
The other thing is, and this, I hate doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Making an assumption, in certainly in the Lamino DeMasi shooting and in this shooting, we have different stories, and I guess you got to ask yourself the question: why would somebody change their story 2 years later? And I'm going to assume that there was some kind of pressure put on the witnesses. Either the 2 years of reading newspaper articles and looking at photos kind of changed their mind, if you will, or the cops just said, "Look, Berkowitz is in jail. We just want to close this case out," and basically the witnesses told the cops what they wanted to hear.
It could be either way.
Yeah.
I definitely agree there. Also, the other part of the story that he changed between 77 and 79 was what he witnessed in 77. He didn't talk about the actual seeing it. Okay,
he was half a block away.
He was half a block away, but in 79, he says that he saw Berkowitz, or the shooter, put Virginia in a headlock, which didn't happen because he put the book up. The gun was shot through the book. You can't have somebody in a headlock with the book in front of it.
Not only that, again, just putting myself in that position.
Mm-hmm.
If I was that close where I could see the headlock, gun going into her mouth, and then hearing a gunshot, I wouldn't know which way anyone ran, because I'd be either running in the opposite direction or diving for cover.
I think also
an active shooting scene, and this guy's just standing there like taking notes, like a reporter.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I think also, not to be gross about it, but if you did that, you'd be blood splattered. Okay, there'd be blood all over the shooter. If you get somebody in the headlock and you go pow, okay, I think that you're going to have, especially a large caliber bullet. Okay. Yeah. So, and then he'd see somebody, covered in blood running past him. Maybe. Okay. But that's not what he said in 77. In 77, he also describes the person running towards him away from the shooting.
Right.
As, a young, it could a teenage, could be male or female, wearing a ski cap.
Yeah.
With hair coming out under the ski cap. Now, the other thing about this shooting is this is when they publicly came out and said we have multiple shootings that are related. They didn't say serial killer, but that's really kind of what they were saying. That press conference was 2 days later, I think on the 10th.
Well, yeah.
Right. And a Beam came out. Now, at that press conference, Chris, tell us what happened, because he mentions the ski cap person.
Right. Mike, so, here's another thing about the detail. Yeah. If you look at it, the original guy was also wearing a dark sweater, while the next time in 79, he said wearing a white shirt. So it's a very big difference.
Yeah. I think you would have seen that perp walk of Berkowitz with the white shirt like 1,000 times in 2 years. Yeah. So, it just is, the media saturated it so much. I think he changed his story. But Chris, getting back to the press conference, what did Abe Beam say?
Okay, so I want to touch on one thing. It's one quick point. Carl, in 77, when he gives that interview for that area, Forrest Hills, you guys are all live in Queens or have lived in Queens.
Yeah.
Carl, you're from Queens. Forrest Hills isn't a place where people are getting shot every day.
No.
And when you think about Barlow's statement, the last thing he's thinking about when he's giving that statement at that time is that there was a shooting. He says firecrackers. And he also says when he saw the person running, he didn't even care. And in 79, he had the whole entire map put together of where this guy ran to after he said, "Oh, Jesus," and ran by him.
Right.
In 77, he says, "I have no idea where he ran. I didn't think much of it at the time." And I think that's really important if you're going to compare the 77 to 79 interview.
Sure. And one other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once the ski cap ran past Barlow, if I'm not mistaken, two blocks further down was the street that the joggers lived on, and
saw the other person,
and saw the other person. So it kind of makes sense that the ski cap was running towards the guy with the whoever it was, Berkowitz or not, the guy in the beige trench coat, who's a half a block away from the jogger's house, and that's where the getaway car is.
Exactly.
It's not much. It's not much of a leap, and maybe it's assuming, but it's not much of a leap really to say these two were together. And if you got two, you got a conspiracy.
100%.
Okay. Right. So, so I getting back to the original point at the beginning of the show is this shooting, I think, is very, proof wise. It's a lot of proof that there were multiple people involved. Okay. Right. I think, that would mean that, Berkowitz is not the only shooter. Okay. So it goes back to that. But I want to make the point again, Chris, with the press conference.
Yes.
Okay. Because Abe Beam mentions ski cap. Tell us about that.
Right. So let's just first talk about why Abe Beam even has this press conference.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We often look at things that happened in the 70s in 2022 with a lens of 2022, and you really got to understand what's going on at the time.
That's true.
Forrest Hills was probably a great place to live in 77, but the
rest is,
and that's correct. In the rest of the city, was more or less in disarray, at least main parts, the parts that we all know as New Yorkers. And Abe Beam was up for re-election. He was having a ton of problem with crime. There were streetwalkers all over the place. The finances were no good in the city. It was a complete mess. And, one thing about politicians is they want to get reelected. And I think at this moment, with all the stuff that was going on in the background with ballistic checks, they found, a yellow bag at the somewhere near the scene of the crime, which had, some traces of lead and other items in there. I think it was like green, white, and red threads or something to that effect, and a hole at the end of it. I think Abe Beam said, "You know what? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to insert myself in this case, and we're going to catch this guy, and this is going to be the reason why I get reelected. It's going to be a great moment."
No doubt that politics were involved, no doubt.
Yeah. So Abe Beam and some of his some of the bureaucratic group within the ranks of the New York City political world, as well as the police department, have their press conference, and despite the fact that on March 9th in the newspapers, Ski Cap, as we all know him in the community, was the main suspect. By March 10th, at that press conference, they're saying no. They're saying the guy that we want to talk to about this murder, the guy that we believe committed this murder, was brushback hair guy. The reason why I believe that to be true, the reason why they did it, they didn't just pull that guy out of a hat. It was the fact that there were other witnesses seeing someone similar to the guy with brushback hair with a thick yellow bag underneath his arm, which tells me at some point, whoever the brushback hair guy was had a gun or was seen to, what they think, have a gun underneath his arm at some point that night from other witnesses in the police reports. They do say that they want to still talk to Ski Cap guy. They just don't think he's the person that did the shooting. why is that really important, though, guys? The reason, and to anyone watching, it's important because you have two witnesses saying that there were two different people at in or around the scene of the crime. You have the politician saying there were two people, ski cap and raincoat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have the police also saying the same thing. So there's I guess consensus amongst everyone associated with this murder at this time, those investigating it, those who were there, that two people are there. That is so key in all of this,
That's
in my
true.
opinion. You know, and all of it's there. If anyone wants to reach out to Mike or Rob or Carl, I can send you PDFs of newspaper clippings. I can point you to the pages very easily in the police reports that can be found on the People vs. David Berkowitz website. It's all there. You just have to be able to put it together. You know, I think the press conference was a way for this mayor to try to really take the reins and look like a hero. And unfortunately, I think it did a little bit of disservice to this case.
I think they needed to look like they were doing something.
Right.
Okay. At this point, Carl, was the Omega task force around yet?
That's when it was
It
formed.
started.
Like, it was kind of like formed at that press conference.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So
how long it took them to actually set up shop at the 109th and Flushing, I'm not really sure. I would guess within days.
yeah, I don't think it would take too long.
And just, yeah, and it's my understanding that though I've been asked this question several times over the years. You know, the 109, why the 109 precinct in Flushing? And believe it or not, it's a real simple answer. The 109th had a whole floor that they weren't using. It was a relatively new precinct.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the second, third, or fourth floor, but I'm pretty sure it's a fourth floor building, and one of the floors was not being used. So it was kind of like, all right, that's what we're
simple.
going.
Yeah, just simple reason.
You know, and it's just kind of weird because, well, I guess at that point they did they did tie in my shooting, which is in the 109th precinct, but and of course the Eliphas shooting is actually in another precinct, but it borders. It's not far from the 109th.
Next neighborhood over, pretty much.
It's just kind of interesting that that's where they set up shop. And you know, if you're familiar with Queens, Forrest Hills, it's basically what is it? The Grand Central separates Flushing, South Flushing to Forrest Hills. So it's, you know, it was. There's no way it was planned that way, but it is kind of interesting that a lot of shootings happened within fairly close proximity of the 109.
Right. Now, I want to get into, Chris, you brought up in your timeline about some of the stuff that doesn't make sense regarding the time, the day that this happened, the time that it happened, you know, and also I guess we could get into the Columbia University coincidences and stuff with that. It happened during the week, the shooting. It was in the middle of the week, which was different than the last three, okay, which were on the weekends. It was at 7:30 at night, roughly, okay, which was still at that time, you know, the tail end of rush hour. So it was very brazen kind of thing to do. And it was only a few hundred feet away from the Fruend shooting. So what do you think plays into that a little bit?
Well, it's I don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at all of the murders, they usually happen in the middle of the night. This one happens at 7:30, 7:45. This one happens very early in the month. Most of the shootings happen in the very least at the second half of the month. If you count, I think Esau and Suriani, that one happened on the 17th, but everything happens towards the end of the month. And we touched on this a little bit on the last show, or at least after the last show. Carl and I talked about it. This one just doesn't fit. And the one thing that really kind of sticks with me is the fact that this one happens so quickly after the original shooting in exactly the same spot, right? I mean, this is that really. I mean, you could get the cult will go back to the same neighborhood multiple times, same area multiple times, but there's usually a pretty long cooling off period before they do it. In this case, they went
let me stop you here for 1 second. Really, the only other shootings that you could say are, neighborhood wise are the Bronx ones.
Yes.
Okay. They were in close proximity, but you're still talking blocks away.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, we went out there last year, Rob and Carl and myself, and it's not even in you can't even see from one shooting to the other.
No.
This is like you're just looking across the street practically.
Yeah, this
between,
is
between the two.
This is so crazy.
Whoever did this shooting, okay, whether it was Berkowitz or to me, it doesn't seem like it was, but whoever did this, I mean, they had to be aware of the other shooting. So why would it? Why so in such close proximity? Was it maybe to create fear in that neighborhood? Like, okay, you got people shooting each other in Forrest Hills,
right?
That
I mean, you really have, three options, right? It's either another spontaneous murder in that area, right? Which I'm miffed on that one. Because it doesn't appear, at least early on, that Berkowitz wants to get caught, right? Or anyone wants to get caught, for that matter.
Yeah.
Could she have been a witness in the Fruend shooting? Mike, we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, I that's a big assumption. I mean, it to me, I mean, obviously there's nothing in the police records about that. We know that, okay? And just because she was in the same neighborhood, that also happened at 12:30 at night, something like that, okay? That shooting. So I kind of, it's possible. Anything is possible, but I don't think so. I don't think it was something like, you saw the shooting, so we're going to come after you. How would they have known who she was even?
Right. What's more likely, spontaneous or that she saw the murder? I mean,
I think it's more likely it's spontaneous or a hit.
Right. Now,
okay, for another reason altogether.
Exactly. So if it's a hit,
I think it was a hit.
Yeah.
I go back to, like, wasn't she doing some weird stuff? Wasn't she dating a professor or something?
Well, we're going to get into that. Yeah, we are going to.
So why couldn't you hire these guys? Hire these guys. These guys are already banging people out. You know what? So they know they're all down together, and you know what? Let's do some business together. I need this girl to be gone because she might export the business or whatever the hell they were doing in Colombia. Because this, out of any of the shots, this is a hit. And at 7:30, why the hell will you take a chance at 7:30 when there's people around, shoot somebody? There's a lot of chances that you might get caught just doing it that bravely and that early,
Right.
What do you think, Cole?
Yeah, no, it's it kind of it reminds me of the hit at Sparks Steakhouse,
Castellano. Yeah.
It's 7 o'clock at night, and it's like,
yeah,
are you guys out of your mind? But sometimes the fact that the street is filled with people and cars, actually, certainly in the Castellano case, it actually helped them escape the shooting.
Yeah, right in Midtown.
Forrest Hill's a little bit different, but I know, I am familiar with that neighborhood, and there's a lot of one-way streets there. I still, but with that said, I still go back to, it's pretty brazen doing something at 7:30. Again, you have to realize you're
that goes back.
You're a half a block from the railroad station.
Yeah,
you're
right.
2 blocks from the subway station, and you're also 2 blocks from Queens Boulevard that have several bus lines that people use for commuter. So at 7 o'clock, it's still a lot of. I don't know. It's like it seems to me, based on the time and the day, it would be it kind of lends itself to be a hit of some sort.
Well, exactly, because it would be a targeted person because of the time. We know she's there at this time.
Exactly.
We know she left Columbia. I mean, me and you, Chris, you asked me, how long it would take to go from Columbia on the subway. I would say you could do it in about 45 minutes. Okay. Right. You could take an express down the west side, change at 7th Avenue and 57th Street for the E train. Okay. That still ran like that in the 70s. Run across the tracks, get the train to Queens, the E train to Queens. And that's express also. Okay. So, you could probably do it in 45 minutes or an hour if you don't make a quick connection. So she had to probably leave Columbia by, I would say, 6:30, maybe 6:45 the latest. Right. Okay, to get her there at 7:30. Now, she was also carrying a large duffel bag with clothes inside. Okay, which, on a weeknight, you got to wonder like what she was doing with that. Now, she was involved with her professor
at Columbia.
Right. His name is Vladimir Lunis. Okay. It's interesting, some of the stuff circling around this. He, at the same time of the shooting, there was a call girl ring going on in Columbia. Now, I'm not saying Virginia was involved with that in any way, but there was some illegal activity going on there out of the West End bar, which Michael Carr frequented. Right? Okay. So let's look at Lunis a little bit for a minute. Okay, what do we know about him?
What I know about Lunis from the research, and this is something the cops would have never cared about ever.
Yeah,
is that during this time period, there's the possibility, a strong possibility, that he had two places of residence in which he was connected to. One was in the West Village on Morton Street,
right?
Which you guys know that area. I think we all know that area pretty well.
44 Morton Street, I believe.
And the other was in Dobbs Ferry. Dobbs Ferry is a name that I think most people that live in New York might go through their lives and never hear. But Dobbs Ferry is one of the river towns. It sits on the Hudson River. He lived on Broadway. Broadway is connected to North Broadway in Yonkers, going along the river. I believe it's the old Albany Post Road route, 9. It's a 10-minute drive from his house or from his apartment on Broadway in Dobbs Ferry to Untermeyer Park, and probably a 15-minute drive to the Carr residence. Now, when you think about what the professor was a professor of, he was a Russian language professor. And if we're going to go with the Michael Carr angle on this, Michael Carr was very much interested in his Russian heritage. He went by the moniker Baron D. Chernovsky. And, there could at least be something that these two gentlemen have in common during that time period. If they're frequenting the same bar, they live extremely close to each other. And by the way, other members suspected of being in the cult or having relationships to the cult lived in Hastings, which is just south of Dobbs Ferry, and Dobbs Ferry itself, or at least have had some connections to those areas. Again, if you're a police officer in Queens investigating a group of murders that have just kind of been strung together through different types of evidence like ballistics and so forth, you're not, even if you question Vladimir Lunis at that time and he says, I have a place in Dobbs Ferry, they're not going to care about that. It's not even it matters.
It's not on their radar at all.
It's nowhere near their radar. They don't care. Yeah. Right. Yeah. In fact, they're like, oh yeah, you want to get out of the city, you go up to Dobbs Ferry. Right. I would venture to believe that maybe the cop thinks that that's so far upstate that it's like a mountain house.
Yeah. like a million miles away. Yeah,
exactly. You know, the Columbia University thing, when you brought it up to me, Mike, and when I've heard about it throughout my own research over the years, always kind of seemed to me like, yeah, I don't know if I really believe that, because I think the Columbia University kids is as rich kids who, you know, they do really well in school. Parents are college educated. They're more competitive academically than they are, you know, playing cards or or partying like I did in high school. That's for sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But or playing sports. But I started doing some research on like on whether that's even possible. Okay. And I found some really interesting stuff that kind of lends itself to there really could have been something happening at Columbia University as far as escorts are concerned and call girls. Do you want me to get into that now, or do you want me to go back?
Yeah, we could get into it a little bit. Definitely want to cover it. This conversation, Carl, I think you'll agree with what I'm going to say. It's a lot of dots to connect, and it doesn't really connect. It doesn't. Right. I'm not trying to shoot it down because I believe that there's a little bit of smoke here.
Right.
Okay. But
I agree.
You can't place the professor in the bar.
Right.
Okay, that we know of. But what we do know is that Professor Lunas and Virginia Voskerichian were involved with each other. Yep. We know that. Okay. We know that she came home that night when she got shot with a large bag with clothes in it. Right. Now, then you got to wonder why. Well, was she doing a laundry maybe, or was there some kind of problem between them? She just grabbed her shit and left. Okay. Right. He has an apartment in the West Village. Okay. I wonder is there anything in the police report? I never thought of this until right now. Is there anything in the police report, Chris, that knows for sure she left from Columbia that night?
That seems to be.
Is it just an assumption? Because it could have just been, look.
That seems to be the assumption that she was coming home from school.
What if she came from Morton Street?
Certainly a possibility.
Okay, it would be the same. It would be the same amount of time to get home. She would have been coming from, the more southern part of Manhattan. Okay, still the West Side. She would have had to connect with a train going to Queens. So I think it would be about the same time frame to do it. But most professors and school gets out like these things end at 4:00, 5:00, maybe even earlier. Yep. I mean, we don't know what went on that day. She supposedly was in class,
right?
But maybe is there anything that places her in Columbia leaving? Like I saw her leave at this time.
I have nothing in the police reports to suggest that at all. And if someone wants to prove me wrong on that and say, no, there's something here that says that, that's great. I appreciate it. I went through like 526 documents in that police report, and I don't have anything concrete that says she left Columbia or she left Morton Street.
Well, I think, and again, take it for what it's worth. I hadn't seen this written, but if I'm not mistaken, Joe Coffey, Detective Joe Coffey, has stated on TV that she was coming home from Columbia. It doesn't make that's not. It doesn't make it 100% true, but I do believe that Joe Coffey did say that.
The interesting.
There's just a lot of things here that as Mike was saying earlier, there's a lot of dots and they kind of don't connect. But on the other hand, they kind of do connect because it's a big city. There's it's just kind of funny that hell, not only is it a big city. There's many colleges, there's many universities within the city, right. And here we got a woman who's a victim of the Son of Sam shootings, who's dating a professor at Columbia University. We know Mike Carr hangs out at Columbia University. We know he hangs out at that bar across the street from Columbia University. There's a lot of strange stuff in there. And again, I'm not privy to Chris had mentioned that document. I guess it's an interview talking about Professor Lunas, but his name's redacted.
Yes. Yeah. So
Right.
When I looked at and again, this, I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble or anything, but it was a long time ago. But all indications that I've seen in reports, what do you call it, like profile reports, his name, Lunas's name, has always been associated with a woman's name. Not the same last name, but in the three residents that you talked about,
yes,
there's a woman's name.
Was that his wife?
I'm assuming it's his wife, but so now that opens up, and the reason I bring this up, because now it opens up, maybe the cops just didn't want to get involved in, a married guy or a guy living with a woman, because her name, and I apologize, I don't want to say a name, but anyway, her name is associated with the Morton Street, associated with Dobbs Ferry.
And also a place in Richmond Hill, Queens.
Right. So so it's quite apparent that he's either married to this woman or he's been living with her, and now he's having an affair with somebody else. So that could have put the NYPD kind of like, hands off. Like, I don't want to, they don't want to. They're trying to investigate a murder.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's good police work, but I could certainly understand why they would.
And they probably weren't looking at Lunas as any kind of suspect,
right?
Okay, which I'm not saying he is or was, but right. If you look at the stuff swirling around the case, the fact that it looks like a hit, the next question is who put the hit on,
right?
And then you have to look at what's going on in her life.
Right.
Okay.
And we have very
little on that. Yeah.
Very little information on what's going on, in her life, and we really don't even know the extent of the affair. Was it a one night was it a one night stand? Was it an ongoing relationship?
From the police reports, it basically states they were going together.
Okay.
Doesn't say how long.
Doesn't say how long, no, but her previous relationship before that was 2 years prior. That name is redacted. I've never been able to.
She was only 19 years old, right?
21.
21?
20 or 21, something.
Oh, okay, my bad. All right, 2021. All right.
She transferred into Columbia from a smaller, I think, community college of some kind, which I'm sure she did the 2 years at, or maybe at least a year. So
yeah, I got you.
Yeah, one other thing I want, Chris, you had mentioned this, I think before we went live, but I didn't know this, that Lunas came to the United States in 1974. Is that what you said?
Yes, 74, 75. Well, maybe a little bit before that, but that's when he gets his Social Security number.
Okay.
I would imagine because he was coming here with a job. He was coming here for a job. He probably got that fairly quickly. Unless he was here for 10 years and then he got the job. I don't know. To me, that doesn't necessarily make sense. I think he came here as a professor. Columbia wanted him as a Russian languages professor.
All right, because I was gonna question, like, that's, you come into the country in 1974 and then you land a job as a professor a year later. But you're right. Well, first of all, there's probably not a whole lot of people who can teach a Russian language.
Right.
And that's a good point that, like you said, he might have gotten into the country because he had a job already.
Right. And
now one other job.
Cold War too, guys. So
What's that?
Right.
the height of the Cold War. I mean, I'm not the height, but it was pretty close to the height.
Right.
But here's another interesting point that you had on your outline, Chris, is he had another profession. Okay, it wasn't just teaching Russian language; he was translating Russian books.
Yeah, he's translated some Russian books. I have a link to it that I can send to anyone who would like it. But basically, it's a passage from the Russian Orthodox Church writings, and it's not anything that would say this guy's a killer or this guy was involved with a cult or anything like that. But you start thinking about what we talked about last week with the Necro, or not last week or last episode with the Necronomicon,
right? The Eastern Rite,
and yeah, I mean it's kind of you start getting those like goosebumps as you're finding all this stuff out when you're doing the research, and you're like, how the hell is all of these themes kind of coming back into this story, and they're not supposed to be connected, and I don't know, it definitely puts up, my antennas start to raise out of my head like this.
Well, what I find so interesting about that is the translation aspect. Okay, right. He has this other job of translating Russian books into English. Okay, now last week we talked about, in the last episode, the Necronomicon.
Yep.
Okay, being translated. They were looking for translators at that time.
Yeah.
Okay, to translate that book.
Right.
Okay. Now, did he have any expertise in that? I'm not saying he had any involvement in that at all, but it, like you say, it's just this kind of like stuff that's in the ether. It's all kind of close, but you can't connect the dots.
Right.
And, I don't know what do detectives do when in investigating a case and they see something like this? Carl, I mean, do they ignore it or do they run with it?
Well, it depends, how close it is to quitting time. It's like I got to fill out paperwork. You know what? Right? Have you ever been stopped by a cop?
At the end of his shift, he's letting you go.
It's like, just go. I want to go home.
Yeah, no, I agree, and also they keep, even in the reports, they mention that there aren't a lot of 44s. That style 44 out there. There was only 10,000 in New York at the time, I think.
Yeah.
And if you look at how much time they spent on ballistic checks, and how heavy they were thinking about ballistics at this time, I really think they wanted to figure out who's got the gun, right? And we solved the case more or less.
We've talked about this before on past shows, not with you, Chris, but Carl, we talked about this, and how hard would it have been to knock on a few doors on people who had that type of weapon?
Yeah.
Okay, and be like, listen, where were you this day and time? They never really did that.
Yeah, but Chris, Mike, wasn't the weapon registered to somebody else in Texas? The gun that he had.
Well,
remember that?
Right. Well, eventually they found that out once that they had him. Okay, but
I mean, what we're talking about right now is, to me, a microcosm of what's wrong with the Son of Sam case, and why 45 years later we're still talking about it.
Right.
Rob just brings up Billy Dan Parker, the guy, his army, Berkowitz's armament buddy, who bought the gun. Now, let's just stick with this for a while. I know we're talking about
Voskerichian,
but just bear with me. Berkowitz, he gets a gun. He says his reason for buying the gun is it's unsafe to drive back to New York without a weapon. But but he drove down there without a weapon. So right away, there's like, that doesn't make sense. The other thing is Billy Dan Parker. There's actually videos of him. He lawyers up and clams up, and his lawyer makes one statement, and you never hear of Billy Dan Parker again.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a cop. But if he bought the gun that killed people, I don't know. Shouldn't there be? I think there would be some kind of responsibility laid on to Billy Dan Parker, but he just disappeared. And the reason I'm going down this path is this is just another example of not following through on evidence or suspects. I mean, we have that whole thing with Donna Lauria's ex-boyfriend, who broke up, or she broke up with him a few weeks before she was killed. He also owned a 44,
right?
And he was conveniently in Colorado the night of the shooting, so he's exonerated. Well, hell, I mean, this is the kind of stuff. It's the kind of stuff is why we're still talking about Son of Sam, because it's and again, I'm not cop bashing. They really didn't know what the heck they were doing.
And during this time period, the ranks were hollowed out.
Well, that's true too.
Well,
you just went through a big layoff, and people worked overtime. And I've talked to a lot of cops, and they, be off camera, they'll openly admit it's like, yeah, we should have done this, we should have done that. Some of these same cops will tell me off camera that you're 100% right. Other people were involved. We all know, we meaning the police, we all knew other people were involved. But it's like every, what spawns conspiracies, hiding information from people that,
not being transparent,
not being transparent. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, and I mean, you can almost every quote unquote real conspiracies and fake conspiracies can almost always be traced back to a particular date and time where some official didn't tell the whole truth and left it open for your imagination. And, and sometimes it's a real conspiracy and sometimes maybe it's not, but by not being transparent, you lose all that. And I think, Carl, that there was such pressure to get this case solved. Okay. And close it. Okay. It could have gone so many different ways. They could have treated the end of this like, okay, David Berkowitz is arrested. Okay. They could have left the case open and said, well, there's other people out there involved. I mean, just based on the Voskerichian with the two, but they were so pressured with the decision from probably, up high to close this case, end it. There's nobody else. It's done. Let's get it over with. It's an election year. Who knows how high this went up to? Okay, right. So
it's a case,
right? But it's not. So they didn't want to keep this case open and say we're going to investigate now. Other aspects of it after Berkowitz was arrested.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Sometimes if you don't want the answer.
Yeah,
that's true.
Maybe they didn't want the answer because maybe Mauritari is not as crazy as people think. Maybe this did lead up to, rich and famous. I always like to say the rich and famous, but includes the politicians, includes, the movers and shakers of the time.
Right.
If I want to, just to blow everyone's mind real quick, since we brought up Billy Dan Parker and I guess Houston, Texas, Beaumont, Texas area. So when you take a deep dive into the occult in America, you go back to Crowley, right? Is one of the people that you're going to learn a lot about. Crowley had two disciples, I guess you could call them. One was L. Ron Hubbard, and the other was Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons, is still known today as one of the great physicists of our time. I think he focused on jet propulsion and a lot of other stuff, but he was heavily into the occult and the OTO with Crowley. Obviously, L. Ron Hubbard goes on to start Scientology or become one of the big Scientologists of that time. Parsons died in an explosion. At the time he was married, his wife moved to Houston, Texas after he died, or Beaumont, Texas, which is a half hour away.
Outside of Houston, yeah.
She started a cult while she was there. And you want to know what the name of that cult was?
What?
The Children.
Where do you get this information from?
It's publicly available. You can find it. Just look.
Just being devil's advocate. I mean, because someone could say you're fucking making that up.
I'm not making that up. I swear, I'm just telling you. Look, my poor wife has to deal with me screaming and yelling in the middle of the night, going, I can't believe that's going on. It's like, I'm a diehard Raider fan. Everybody can see that. When the Raiders score, I go crazy. When I find stuff like that, I'm like, what the, and my wife's sleeping. What are you doing? You can't yell like that. I'm like, but it blows your mind because, Carl, I think ultimately you're saying, and we've said this, it's like there's smoke, there's a lot of dots, it's connecting them. That's hard. But when you start working this research and you start seeing all these things, it makes you cross-eyed by the end of the night. You're like, I can't believe it.
How many coincidences can you have before you have to say
this is related?
Right.
I never said I had all the answers. And I don't think collectively the four of us have all the answers. But
no.
But man, there's just too many coincidences just to say I solved the case. I'm walking away from it. It was Berkowitz all along. He acted by himself. I mean, just in the last 45 minutes, we've if not proven, we've at least opened up the window to say there's more people involved. You can't just, I don't know. You can't or can you? Can you just say, well, that witness doesn't matter? They're making it up, or
exactly.
I mean,
you can't pick and choose and cherry pick your facts,
right?
Okay, right. Where it's convenient to work in one angle and not another. If you're trying to prove a point, David Berkowitz, if he says one thing and it proves your point, oh, okay, he's telling the truth. And then if it doesn't prove your point, oh, he's a liar. Okay, you can't be like that. Okay, you have to look at everything. And again, over the summer we had that great data dump. Okay, and I think that a lot of people looked at that, and we've said this many times, as the be all end all, and it's not. Okay, but it's just another piece of the puzzle. Okay, and just to bring it up, there was over the last couple of weeks there was another one. Okay, another data dump.
Right,
and I wanted to get into this briefly. We may cover it more on a future show, but as late as 2000, for those who haven't seen this, it's in the People versus David Berkowitz website. A FOIA request was done, and they have FBI papers, and in these FBI papers, it places David Berkowitz in the process church at that time. Okay, right. Yep. I think it says 75, something like that, 76, right? Was it say, Chris?
He was a member of the process church. They don't give a time.
They don't give a date. Okay, my bad.
But they also say that Miriam de Grimston was
they implicate her in this, and these papers are from as late as 2000, the year 2000 in the FBI. So, many of these, if you looked at it, there's a lot of it's redacted. They don't say how they know this. But, these are FBI papers. Perhaps another FOIA request needs to be done to get the further back information, the investigation that led to that conclusion. Okay. But if the FBI, as late as 2000, 22 years ago, is saying this, well, how can anybody just think it was a one shooter, and that's it. I mean, you can't. There's a conspiracy here. Okay, do you agree, Carl? I mean,
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
The Queens DA, all that information. It's all very interesting. There's some valid stuff there, but again, you can't ignore the fact that we know. Well, I know that at least 3 of the interviews that I listened to in the data dump from 79 contradicts what those same people said in 77.
They all did,
and there's probably more, but I know for sure. Yeah. Barlow and Tommy Zano.
Tommy Zano was the other one,
and Lamino DeMasi. They tell totally different stories. What's true? Again, I'll go back to what I said. I tend to believe what they said the day after the shooting or a week after the shooting is a lot more valid than what they said 2 years later. But I don't know. But what I do know is you can't take any of that information by itself and run home with it and say you solved the case, because you didn't. It just, like everything else in this case, every time we get some good information, it just opens up 10 more questions.
Yeah,
every time we close one window,
right,
another
window opens.
Right,
exactly.
We always say that, and it's true.
And when you look at this Voskerichian case, I mean, for years I've always been looking at the Moskowitz case as and I think everyone has, as like the main conduit for there to be some sort of a conspiracy. I think it's covered the most extensively in The Ultimate Evil for that fact. And you look at this Voskerichian case, and you're seeing that, what, like I said earlier, with the politicians, the police, the witnesses, there are 2 people there. I think this might even be a better example of conspiracy than some of these other shootings for that reason.
Yeah.
Because it's so clear in the police reports. If you look at the Freud police report from a month earlier, they have nothing. It is all based on these love letters. That's the only thing that you could take from it, where you're like, okay, maybe she got killed because of these love letters or something to that effect. But there's no witnesses, and I actually feel sorry for the police officers on both of those 2 cases, because the minute there's a murder in an area where there aren't a ton of murders, every Tom, Dick, and Harry who has a story is going to the police with some kind of information that makes either no sense, is contrived or made up, or just leads them on a wild goose chase that really, it ends up being a waste of time, but you have to take, I'm assuming, as a police officer working a murder investigation, you have to take every statement. You have to talk to every person, regardless of how crazy they are or how ridiculous what they're saying is. It's just it's tough on all levels. It really is.
You brought up. I'm sorry, Carl. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a quick little side story. I know for a fact that the police were looking at suspects that they thought might be the Son of Sam, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 8 of them in Queens.
Yep.
And after I believe it was after I'm not positive, but it doesn't really matter. But I believe it was after Voskerichian shooting. Marlon Hopkins, who was actually assigned to the Freund shooting, a homicide detective in Queens, went to this the suspect's house, apartment in I believe it was in Woodhaven, which is not too far from Forrest Hills.
Next neighborhood over.
Right, exactly. And sure enough, the guy was there. He knocked on the door, and the guy was there. So that's how they eliminated him from being the Son of Sam.
Wait, I don't understand. Just because he was home?
Yeah.
What am I missing?
Yeah.
Well, how is that eliminating somebody? What does that mean?
Well, I'm telling you what Marlon Hopkins told me.
Right. I see a lot of that in the police. I see that in a lot of the police.
Oh, so you're saying because he was home the night of the shooting?
Yeah. It
okay, I got you.
Soon after the shooting, like the way the way it was explained to me, if you're on duty, you're a homicide detective in Queens, you're on duty. If there's a homicide,
it's yours.
You go there. Now, of course, there's I'm sure there's more than two detectives working homicide in Queens on any given night. Very soon after the shooting, and again, I don't know the timeline. I have no reason to believe that Marlon Hopkins would lie about something he did 40 years ago. This was kind of like a casual conversation. But that's the story he told me, that so they did have people under surveillance, and that's the point I was trying to make.
Yep.
That the police did have like some, maybe it's this guy, that guy, the crazy guy that we always see walking down the street, maybe it's him, so they were surveilling certain people, and
right, and a lot of people, were going to them with, hey, I was at the shooting range with this guy, and he said he wanted to blow someone's brains out, and you got to check that out. And then you have people that own 44s. You had, police buffs that were in the area that they had to question, and they found out that went nowhere. Because of the young age description given on Ski Cap, there were a lot of young boys from the neighborhood saying, kid from my class did it. He's about 13 years old. He lives at so-and-so address. And you have to follow up on it,
Yeah.
And it's like, it's rough. I mean, it's rough. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that for a living, have to follow up on a bunch of garbage all day. And I'm
didn't the 112 precinct there in Forrest Hills, didn't they get a call about the Ski Cap being in McDonald's there?
So this is really, really crazy. And I think, when you look at what the cult did during the shootings, they like to antagonize the police. They like to antagonize really everyone in New York at that time, whether it's through letters or the actual shootings themselves. But the day they do the press conference, right, and they say, or it's either the day they did the press conference or the day they memorialized the press conference in newspaper articles. I think it was the 112th precinct or one of the precincts in that area. They get a call saying there's a guy in a ski cap wearing clothing that kind of resembles what Ski Cap was wearing that night, is going to be at a McDonald's, and they want to talk to you about the murders. Right. And the police show up. They go to the McDonald's. They wait around. They drive around the block, and they can't find that person. I'm wondering, why that happened. It could have been just kids saying, "Yeah, Ski Cap's at the thing." Like the guy with the watch caps at the thing. Go get him, and they're playing a prank, and they're sitting there laughing at the McDonald's while the police are driving around the block. Or maybe, whoever was involved in the shooting, wanted to kind of like say, no, I did it, and I want to talk to you about it, but I'm never going to talk to you about it, right? Or something like that. I don't know. But it's just those
just a toy with them.
Happen all over this, all over this case. I'm sure as we go through more reports, you're going to find other instances similar to that fact. What I can tell you is, and I've looked at, I spent a lot of time on the Fruend case because of the close proximity and the close time frame. It's really night and day in terms of the amount of talking, and it makes sense because the Fruend case was so late at night. And this one was so early in the evening that there was just so many more people around. So there's so much more testimony or people to talk to about what was going on that evening. Fruend, there's just nothing. I mean, as far as I could tell, they have that love letter. That's it. And Voskerichian, they have a lot of good stuff, but there's way more waste your time stuff in that police report than I've ever than any of them.
Let's because we don't have too much time left. Let's talk about one thing that I thought was very interesting that you found with the data dump that happened over the summer. There were letters that were found. Okay, that Son of Sam letters that were never put out there, and Berkowitz or whoever wrote them was known to date them, timestamp them in some way. And this shooting, March 8th, there's only one letter that out of all these letters that match the day of a shooting. Okay. And that's this particular shooting.
Right.
So there's a letter that Son of Sam letter that says how I'm just paraphrasing. I want to go out and kill. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's time stamped in the morning of March 8th.
Yes.
But
Wow.
there's some discrepancies with this. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So if you look at the handwriting pattern and the writing pattern, overall writing pattern in those documents that are written clearly over the same period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, the timestamps or the dates of these notes and letters that were never sent, I guess, are always at the top.
Top right,
the
top center. Yeah,
exactly. And there's one letter, the one that you just brought up, where it's at the bottom. So that kind of got me a little bit, interested in is there something more there? The A written for AM in print, the capital A is curved at the top, and it's blatantly curved. If you look at any of the print handwriting throughout that group of letters, it's all very, very pointed A's when printed and capitalized.
Right.
Now, I'm not a handwriting specialist. That's not what I do for a living. I'm never going to do that for a living. But it's just so obvious the difference between that A and every other A written in that group of writing, where you almost start to say to yourself, someone put that there after the fact because they wanted to make sure that there is something to say that Berkowitz was interested in killing the day of that murder specifically. There's no other note or letter left behind on the day of a murder in that apartment.
It's the only letter that matches the day of a shooting.
Right. In that group of letters.
Yes.
And I mean, if you look at some of the other handwriting pieces, you could tell that the same person wrote a lot of those letters. But I looked at not call sheets, but like timesheets from the auxiliary police, and you see some similar handwriting there. You almost see something. You almost see almost like a different version of the hanging block lettering from the Breslin letter. I'm not saying that it is. I think after a while of looking at it, I decided it's definitely a different person in those two cases. But there are similarities, and it can take a lot of your time. But I think most importantly for the purposes of this discussion, those 42 miscellaneous notes and letters left behind by Berkowitz in his apartment, that one sticks out to me as something that could have been played with by someone else. That's what I have for you on that. That had the hair standing up on the back of my neck.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at them in the People versus David Berkowitz.com, that website, one after another, you could see these letters, you see the handwriting, you see how he makes his A's sharp, okay, like that. All right, this one is rounded as a capital A. It's like that,
right?
It sticks out, and again, this is just another example of this particular shooting that is just odd. Okay. Yes. It's just one of many things that we talked about today.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'd like to just go back to that Columbia University escort thing. Can we just talk about that? Because I think most people listening, I think most people in the world just would never believe that anything like that could have been going on. And I don't know. Maybe I'm being naive there. Maybe people think that would be something that was happening in the 70s. But I did some digging on that sort of stuff, and I found some things. I mean, there was a professor at Farley Dickinson's University who lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. His name was David Flory. Mm-hmm. He graduated from Columbia in '66 with a master's degree. In the 2000s, I believe it was 2006, he gets jammed up in a sting operation of a call girl network that he set up on the internet. I did further research on the guy, David Flores. In fact, he has his own website set up. And you start to look into this guy who's running an escort service. And he graduates Columbia. Type of professor he is, physics and astronomy. You know, that kind of at the surface shouldn't mean anything. But when you get back into the occult, and you start thinking about Jack Parsons and the OTO and all that other stuff, these guys were all into physics and astronomy. In fact, all the people from back then that were into the occult are now into UFOs. So there's something about the stars and the planets and how they interact with what we're doing here on Earth, and these people that cannot be disregarded. You know, if you look at the links on his website, he links to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He links to things that kind of scream out to you. You know, Parsons. He's a big Star Trek guy, which is big in the occult world for some reason. I've never watched Star Trek before. I can't really begin to understand why that is. But you know, it's just, again, it gets really weird that you have a guy who was connected to Columbia University, lived on the Upper West Side, was involved in a call girl ring, is involved in astronomy, involved in jet propulsion, you know, has you know, names his daughter, gives his daughter a name, a middle name of someone in a J.R. Tolkien book. It all screams out esoterics. It all screams out, you know, like just totally, you know, weird underbelly stuff that most normal people will never encounter in their entire life, outside of maybe reading their zodiac sign,
their horoscope,
daily horoscope, exactly. I went further into it, and right after when the Son of Sam murders, I guess, had ended, also on the Upper West Side, there was a woman with the moniker called the Mayflower Madam, and you know, the Mayflower Madam was this, you know,
that was in the early '80s, Chris, right?
Yeah, early '80s, 80 to 84.
I remember that.
She was like high society type, you know, partying in the Hamptons. You know, partying at the major hotels with Saudi Arabian princes, and, you know, totally hooked in, right? She runs this operation from, I think, 80 to 84, as I already stated. You know how she got brought down? The undercover applicant to become an escort posed as a Columbia University student.
Yeah.
So you know, I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree. I'll give everybody that all day. But come on here, you know, like I feel like I'm being trolled. 45 years later.
It's not uncommon,
right,
to have a girl in college working her way through college.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. In fact, the difference between now and then is if you do that now, it's not so frowned upon as it was.
Oh no.
Okay. You know, I mean, there's women that'll tell you, oh yeah, I was a stripper for 4 years while I was in school just to pay for that. And right. It's like, oh, yeah. You're supposed to go, oh, all right, it's 2022. That's okay. You know, but you know, back in the 70s and the 80s, that was like, you didn't want anybody to know about that.
But people did it.
But people did it. Yeah. And for the Mayflower Madam, and again, this is, you know, nothing to do with the Son of Sam, but Mayflower Madam got taken down because she believed something that she probably saw every day. This person's from Columbia, needs some extra money. Oh, I'll be a call girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so, you know, it could have been
my clientele, by the way. Perfect for my clientele.
Perfect for my clientele.
Because they don't want the streetwalker from the West Side Highway or from Hunts Point. Trust me, they're not looking for that.
You mean the ones that Rob used to go to?
Depending upon what they did that night, they might be looking for that. But you know, I mean, come on now. You know,
look what happened to client number 9.
Yeah,
exactly. And guess what? You know, it's funny because I did some research on that, and this doesn't mean anything at all, but it just kind of it just kind of makes you laugh. You know, the top comments are on that. The people they went to for interview on what the political ramifications are going to be to Elliot Spitzer at that time was a Columbia political science professor. You know, it doesn't mean anything, but I'm just saying, you know, they all come full circle. You know,
it's interesting because so many of these sex cases, whether it's pedophilia or straight up heterosexual sex, it involves the elites, it involves the intelligentsia,
right?
Okay, and that's how this stuff is allowed to exist.
Right.
Okay. Because, these people are into it. So you just kind of look the other way.
Yeah,
all right.
Exactly.
You know, but I mean, even, with Columbia, okay, you got professors, people getting busted with call girl rings. I mean, it's Columbia, for God's sake.
Right.
Okay? Yeah. That's not supposed to happen there, but it does because this stuff all involves, it goes right up the chain. Okay. Right. And I think bringing it back to Son of Sam, I think that's what hindered this case from being explored further at that time.
Right.
It was like, how high does this want to go? How high does this go up? And do we even want to know this? Like to Carl's point.
Exactly.
Okay. They may not have wanted to know. Right. All right. Yeah. And, they had their man. They had their man, and that's it. And he copped to it.
He confessed. He confessed to everything.
Yeah, conveniently.
Once you confess, that's it. Open your case.
Right.
And
he made it very easy for him.
He made it very right. Exactly, Carl. He made it. Berkowitz made it very easy for them to just close it up. Okay. And
sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'm done.
All right. I can already feel the comments when this thing gets posted. Oh, now you're saying Virginia Voskerichian was an escort. That's not what I'm saying.
We're not saying that.
I want to be clear here. That is not what I'm saying.
No.
What I think is a possibility. I don't even know how strong of a possibility it is. Right? Did this professor have some idea of what was going on at Columbia University? Right? Did he know about the Christine Fruend murder? Maybe. Did he know about this? Was he involved in this escort ring? Was something going on there that she found out that made her? It may
not even, Chris. It may not even be that elaborate. Okay, right. You got to look at this case as, it was planned. I think that they wanted to kill Virginia Voskerichian. As opposed to the others, you could say it was like conveniently whoever was there. Okay,
right.
I think there's more evidence of that in this case than in any of the others. Okay, right. So. The next question, I said it earlier, is if you believe that, the next question is, okay, who put the hit on? You have to look at things in her life, the professor, what else was going on, but there could be, you can't rule out something that we just don't know at all.
Exactly.
Okay.
But what we do know is that there was something going on at Columbia University.
Right.
Know that he was connected to Columbia University. Obviously, the professor.
It doesn't connect. I mean, we're not saying Virginia was involved. We're not even saying she knew about it. It's possible that if he was involved in something, not even related to that, okay, that she didn't approve of. Maybe their relationship went bad. Maybe he was afraid she would tell, or it could be something we don't even know. But
I just have been something easy that she said, "You better leave your wife." I'm going to tell her.
Right, of course, 100%.
That happens a lot. That happens a lot, but we just, we don't know. Okay, but we know that there were things in the background here swirling around that this was not just a regular, I don't want to say a regular Son of Sam shooting, but I mean, like what we know, okay, in the style that we seen before and after the shooting, okay. Yes. So, and again, just to repeat, I think that this shooting is the best example of the fact that there's a conspiracy here. There's multiple shooters here. Okay, there's multiple people planning. Okay, at least two. Okay, and then you got to take it back to a much wider conspiracy Hopefully more information is going to come out about what Berkowitz was up to as being in the process church. Okay. Right. I'd like to see more information to come out. It may not have a lot to do with it, but I think it's important, Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know. I think after that dump, Maury looks a lot better, period. I mean,
look, I mean,
the last one, I think he does.
Maury, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. Any Son of Sam show out there would not be there without Maury Terry. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Was he right 100%? No, but you can't take a dump on him because he really, is the reason we were all here in the first place.
And I just hope that the audience understands that I'm not trying to take a dump on Virginia Voskerichian.
No, we're not trying to do that.
I don't think she, when you look at her story, this is a girl. I mean, this is like the perfect, American immigrant story. I mean, she comes here with her family. They obviously loved her deeply. They were living in one of the best neighborhoods in the city. Right. And she works her way through to get to Columbia University. This is a woman that has aspirations. This is a woman that, you would want to see your own daughter kind of grow up to be, get through a community school, a community college, get into one of the greatest universities in the world, Columbia University, and become a student there. I mean, where could she have gone after that? I mean,
she probably would have been very successful. I mean, right. and it's a tragedy because it's a life cut short.
It is,
and I still think that there's so much that we don't know even about her. You know what I mean? That I wish there was. I think only her brother is alive at this point. If I'm right, is that right, Cole?
Yeah.
Yeah. And who knows how much he knows. Okay, he probably didn't know everything going on in her life.
I know he was interviewed once, at least once after the fact. More recently, at least in the 21st century, and he you could tell it's a loss that they'll never truly get over.
How do you get over that?
No, you can't. And he hates Berkowitz, right? But just like any person who's got a family member that's been a victim and they kind of want to move on with their lives, the police say it's Berkowitz, so he hates Berkowitz. And Berkowitz was probably there and should be hated. But what I'm saying is, it's the official story on this,
doesn't jive.
Doesn't jive.
No.
There's just a lot more going on there. And, I'll tell you, in the 526 reports, I don't think the Queens PD ever even went to Columbia University area to research what was going on. At least from what I could tell. Were there calls? Were there things that weren't put into those documents that might have should have happened or should have been? That's possible. I just don't see any evidence that they went up to the Upper West Side of Manhattan and really got to know what was going on down there with Virginia and her friends and colleagues down there. There were phone calls made. There's evidence of that, but I just don't see the type of canvassing in Queens that they did.
And it might be Chris, and we're going to wrap this up. It might be to Carl's point that because she was messing around with a married man or somebody who was with somebody else, the police didn't want to dig too much with this to try to, slander either one of them.
Yep.
But it's there. It's all there.
It is.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. Great show today. We learned a lot. I found out some stuff. I thought of some stuff I never thought of regarding this case. And I'm going to say it again, just in closing. The Moskowitz case, there's a lot of evidence there about multiple shooters. Berkowitz couldn't have done it, but to the people out there, take a deeper dive in this one, and look at the stuff in People versus David Berkowitz. Look at the stuff swirling around this case at the time. The little bit that we know about Virginia, the tragedy of a life cut short. But I think that this one, because even Abe Beam is talking about 2 people there. That means 2 people.
Yep.
That means a conspiracy. Okay. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I think there's a lot of smoke. That's all I got to say. I mean, I think it pretty much proves the point that Maury Terry was trying to make, is that there were multiple people involved in this case. Yep. And that's it.
Yep.
So, all right. So stay tuned for another Son of Sam Chronicles in the very near future. I want to thank Chris again for his hard work and I'm going to say expertise in this whole thing. You are the man, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. It's been
no problem.
A lot of fun, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Carl, thank you. Rob, thank you. And
All right.
we'll see you soon, folks. Take care.
All right. Take care.